Welcome. Welcome to this month's global and new moon call to action event. The intent of the Well of Light's monthly new moon calls is to bring together an open and inclusive global community of the heart. Each month we invite different evolutionary teachers to participate with us. We hope you'll continue to join us each month and spread the words with your friends and family. Our community is really growing, and it's wonderful to have these calls each month. So please spread the word. All of our new moon calls are recorded, and you can listen to the archives at patreon.com/well of light. We have Stephen Post here with us today. Thank you for joining us, Stephen.
You're welcome. It's
Stephen,
nice to be with you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you. Stephen Post, a PhD, is a philosopher, a public speaker, professor of preventative medicine, and the best-selling author who has taught at the University of Chicago Medical School, Fordham University Marymount, Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, and currently at Stony Brook University School of Medicine. He is an elected fellow of the Hastings Center and a senior scholar of the Kennedy Institute of Ethics at Georgetown University. Stephen is a founding director of the Center for Medical Humanities, Compassionate Care, and Bioethics at Stony Brook University School of Medicine in the Department of Preventative Medicine. He's an elected member of both the College of Physicians of Philadelphia and the New York Academy of Medicine. And Stephen's website is unlimitedloveinstitute.com. What a wonderful name for a website. I love it. And Michael Stone is a multifaceted leader in the realm of shamanism and spiritual development. He's on the faculty of the Shift Network and is the host and producer of the Shamanism Global Summit. For the past 15 years, he's hosted KVMR's weekly award-winning show Conversations, which highlights leading-edge thinkers, authors, and activists in environmental restoration, social justice, and spiritual fulfillment. As co-founder of Quantum Consulting, he works with organizations to combine quantum theory with mystical shamanism to promote healing, wellness, and belief change with his clients. Michael leads classes, teleseminars, and workshops on embodied shamanism, meditation, and unity spirituality. And the websites are welloflight.com and Patreon, as I mentioned before, patreon.com/welloflight. And we're using a new format this month. We're on Zoom, so we get to see each other, which is really exciting. And this is our first monthly Zoom call. So things are a little bit different. So we have our controls for those of you who haven't or aren't acquainted with Zoom, haven't used it before. We all have the possibility of muting and unmuting ourselves. And if you scroll down onto the lower black bar of the screen, you'll see that on the left-hand side, there's a microphone icon. When you press that, you unmute and mute yourself. And then beside that is a stop video icon. And when you press that, you either show your beautiful faces or you have your name come up on the screen. If you press Manage Participants, on the right-hand side, you'll see all the different participants' names that are with us today. And there's also a hand icon to raise your hand in there. So if you press that button, then we'll see that you would like to speak into the conference. Now, we will have time for questions after the first hour. So our Q&A portion is at the end, the last half hour, after we do a little experiential type meditation or some kind of experiential type process. So wonderful to have everybody. This time we can't see where everybody's from. So maybe if you scroll with your little mouse, you go over to the chat window and you press chat. On the right-hand side, there's a box that comes up and it says type message here. And the little blue thing should say everyone. So just quickly type in where you are in the world. It'd be wonderful to see where you're situated. And welcome, Stephen and Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marielle. Wonderful to be with you all on this first time we've used Zoom. Very exciting. And we'll have a video recording to send out. It's so good to be with you. I had you on my radio show, Conversations. We had a wonderful talk about your latest book. I think it's Finding God on Highway 80. Just a fabulous book. And I'd love it if you could just start out by telling people a little bit about how you ended up on the road of service and how that's been your life work, really, particularly in the medical industry. So maybe you can give us a little background so they know you personally.
Okay, sure. Well, I actually did just write a book about my spiritual journey called God and Love on Route 80, The Hidden Mystery of Human Connectedness. And it all began when I was up in a boarding school in New Hampshire, and I was much more interested in spiritual classics than most of my colleagues. This was a school that had given rise to amazing economic figures like J.P. Morgan, and that just wasn't what I was interested in. I had this incredible dream when I was 15 that was recurring, and ultimately, I won't go into the story, but it lured me out to the West. I left behind a lot of things, and I uh, went to Reed College in Portland, Oregon. I followed this idea of serving others, which was really for me a very spiritual kind of commitment all my life, and have taken the road where it leads me. I haven't really planned my life. I think it would be arrogant for me to say that I have, but um, I've been responsive to the wonderful people that I've met in a kind of synchronicity and a wonderful, uncanny interaction that has always suggested to me that we can be guided by a sort of infinite mind, a universal consciousness, and that core being is love. And I've followed that path. I think about love as really, in simple terms, when the happiness and security of another is as real to you as your own, you love that person. Still includes you in that, but when they are as real and as meaningful to you as your own with regard to happiness and security, then you love that person. So I've been in medical schools, University of Chicago, Ann Arbor, Michigan, 20 years at Case Med. I've taught philosophy of love at Fordham Marymount. I've been at Stony Brook in the medical school for 11 years, and I just love creating communities that help young clinicians realize that so much of what healing involves is a community that's committed to compassionate communication and interaction, and to really building the kind of spirit that heals.
Brilliant. I love that. Well, that's a great opening too, and much of what you say we'll dive into a little more. But as we're talking about infinite mind and infinite community, just in a way, as a way of becoming present and recognizing this amazing tool we've got through Zoom that connects us all over the world. I know I see people from Peru and from Europe and people who have been on the call before. Like Marielle said, we don't have all the places now, but we're truly a global community. So I'd like to take just a second. Let's close our eyes, fully arrive and let go of whatever it took you to get on this call, whatever expectations you had about the call. Let's just take a few deep breaths together. And as we take these breaths together, just notice that when we have an in-breath and we go all the way to the top of that in-breath and feel it in our body, there's this still place right there. Just kind of allow yourself to slide into that stillness as we let the breath out on the out-breath. And again, on the out-breath, there's that spaciousness, that stillness that's there. And just noticing the body, any energy and sensations. Feel the flow of energy through our body, from our feet, up through our legs and body and arms, torso and face and shoulder and hands and arms. Just feel the energy flow. And just breathing into the center of the heart. And see if you can just get a sense of that fire, that light in the center of the heart that grows brighter as we breathe right into the heart. Notice any feelings or thoughts and just allow them to be there. And as you feel that inner light getting brighter, just feel it filling your whole body, this sense of lightness and light. And right to the outer edges of the body and outward, feel that kind of sense of radiant light coming right out of the center of the heart. Imagine that is your light of love, your light of infinite mind. And as that, just allow it to just stretch outward into your family and community. All the people you know could use a little light right now. Just send that out. Imagine it reaching out. It's really always there. And particularly connecting with all of us that are open to that light on this call. And have that sense of connection just as we're lighting each other's lives up with our own light, and recognize that it's really one light that connects us. One sense of love and connection. Recognizing the infinite nature, infinite interiority, and all the way out to the edges of the universe. And imagine that connection of lights around the world. And this is a call about connection, about service, about belonging to the world and to life. And in that context, set an intention for yourself. What would you like to take away from this call? Particularly look at any parts of yourself or others that you can't love right now, and allow yourself just to open to that and love that which is there. And feel that connection even in the resistance. As we just set that intention like dropping a coin into water and just let it float away. You've already sent the prayer out there. And just take a couple more breaths together. And then there, bringing ourselves back, feeling your fingers and toes and fully back into your body. So welcome back. So Stephen, we're talking about this sense of service and belonging. And I think that's a good place to start. A lot of people, first of all, don't feel like they belong, like there's something wrong with them or something, they're just somehow flawed. And, my sense is we can't love the world if we can't love ourselves. So maybe talk a little bit about your discovery of that. How did you discover that in your own life, that sense of the more you served and loved yourself and loved others, the more you had a sense of belonging and being part of something much bigger?
For me, it really goes down to my teenage years, tutoring French Canadian kids in New Hampshire, and then finding communities over the course of my life where I could fit in, find role models. I was interested in Buddhism, and in those old San Francisco days, really was engaged in a community of like-minded givers. So there's always been good role models in my life. I can't imagine um, anybody being able to love themselves or to serve others unless someone has passed down a kind of torch, maybe intergenerationally. They've had the kind of people in their lives who, in the very small details of kindness, affirm them and make space for them. So I'm a big believer in transmission and passing the torch. And that always allows people to feel a kind of safe haven. And that's where they can peacefully love themselves, because it's a very violent and difficult world out there. And there are so many people who really don't understand their infinite value. I'm a believer that no matter what, every human being has infinite worth and is equally within the divine mind.
Hmm. You know, Stephen, as you're saying that, having these mentors, teachers, sometimes it's parents that you got a lot of love, sometimes you didn't get a lot of love, which is more my experience. But there are, as you said, are people along the way, and there are signs along the way. But not all of us are watching for those signs. You know, some of them, you know, when I look back, there were many signs that I like ran a lot of red lights, you know, on the path. So how do you see that we can tune ourselves to those serendipity, those events that happen that are literally life-changing events that we often miss the opportunity?
Yeah, so we have to get away from the pressures of chronological time and stop rushing constantly from point
Mm.
A to point B so that we can notice. I like Larry Dossey's concept of becoming a noticer. Uh, Notice the winks, the whispers, those incredibly uncanny moments. You know, for my wife and I, once upon a time, we were just coming from Ann Arbor to Fordham. We were parked in front of a Howard Johnson's diner. I'd spent $12,000 on getting an apartment because it was so expensive in New York compared to Michigan. And I was pretty much out of cash. And so we just meditated for a little while, and my wife prayed that someone would come along and give us $100 bill so we could go into the diner, and then we'd be okay, and we'd go to the local hotel on my credit card. So my wife said, you know, somebody just tapped the car. We were just sitting there in the parking lot in a Nissan Sentra. And I said, I don't think so. But she said, yes, they did. So I went out, and there was this big, huge fellow, an African-American. It must have been a Pentecostal service. I don't know. But he looked at me and he said, oh, I'm so sorry about that. Let me just pull out my wallet and I'll give you $100. And I said, sir, you are a Blue Angel dream. And, you know, and I could have pushed that aside and said, well, it's just ultimately chance and probability.
What did you come up with?
Just a second. We've got Marielle trying to get some
Simon,
people
didn't you?
online. Hold on a second. I don't think she knows. Just one moment, please.
Okay.
Your other people are on the line here, tapping in. So she's trying to get everybody on. I know there are people who can't get on the call. Sometimes when you don't have Zoom, it's challenging, but someone is not muted here. Oh, here, it's Charmaine. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. I'm sorry, Stephen.
Oh, it's
Go
okay.
ahead.
Yeah, new technology. It's bound to
It is, right. We're learning.
yeah, it's all in the pathway. Yeah, so you know, taking the time to notice and acknowledge and be grateful in attitude, in heart, for these moments when just the right person is there, sometimes in answer to some desperation, and sometimes in answer to a prayer or meditation, and oftentimes just somehow a gift from the universe. And that really is one of the most important indications that we're not alone in this journey, that we are together, that we're more connected than we understand. And that is the basis of an awful lot of spirituality, is the sense of synchronicity. So in that little event in front of a Howard Johnson's diner in Tarrytown, New York, we experienced something really profound.
Yeah. Well, that says something about prayer and being connected. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about prayer. It's interesting. We had an experience, Marielle and I. We were in Peru, and we had been with a shaman, and in between these two volcanoes. And he said, well, if you ever need anything, you just say a prayer to Umbamburo, the volcano there. And so we went off, and we went to this sacred waterfall, and I saw the waterfall, and I love waterfalls. I went running down, throwing my clothes off, and ran into the waterfall, and was crashing down on my head. And this thing I do is stand under waterfalls, but it was like 100 feet coming down, it was pretty heavy. And I realized all of a sudden that I couldn't see very well. And I had forgotten to take my glasses off. So it was the beginning of our trip, and I didn't have a backup pair of glasses. And we had 3 weeks to go or something like that. So we were searching and searching for, Marielle came in, the water was too heavy, and she had a hat on, and a leather hat on top of that. And we were searching and searching for like 45 minutes to an hour. We were looking, and I was going to give up. And Marielle stopped and said a prayer to Umbamburo, and reached down into the water and picked up the glasses.
There you have it.
So
that's absolutely uncanny and understandable if you recognize the way the universe works. I can remember my college days taking a course on the history of science called Alchemy 101 that interwove quantum with these scientific models. And I do think that these things are, in fact, fine-tuned and kind of beautifully set up by the universe. But can I tell you a story?
Yeah, please.
So 11 years ago, we left Cleveland, Ohio, and my wife and I had raised a couple of wonderful kids in Shaker Heights, which is an inner ring suburb. And your friends are so deep in that kind of a situation because they're the parents of the kids who were on your son and daughter's soccer team or whatever, and there's a special kind of connectivity. And for all kinds of reasons, I had to leave a job of 20 years, which was going well. Maybe I was just kidding myself that home didn't matter that much, and I had this opportunity to come to New York. So I was out behind a hotel in University Circle. This again is in Cleveland, with a friend named Tom, who I just saw the other day because I was back there and visited him. It was about 11 at night, and I was really feeling down. I was thinking, oh my goodness, we're really leaving Cleveland, and this is going to be difficult, and I'm not sure of it. I'm just really wondering, but it's too late now. So lo and behold, it's pitch black out. Out across the parking lot comes an old African-American man, and he's got a lot of different kinds of tokens and interesting leather bits on his vest. And he walked directly up to me and he said, I had a premonition that I should come out here and that you would be here, and I have a stick for you. So he took this, it's really, I guess you'd call it a staff if you wanted to, but it's a staff or a stick, and it's got a little bell here, wooden bell, and it's got a carved face in it, and it's long. And he said,
beautiful.
He said, you're going to need this where you're going. And then he said, this stick is wiser than you are, so you just have to follow it. And I said, if you had a premonition and you came out here, and here I am, and you think I'm the person you had a premonition about, how much for the stick? He said, $40. So I was sitting with Tom Fruta, one of my oldest friends, and I said, Tom, I don't have $40 with me. Do you have $40? So Tom gave him $40. I repaid Tom later on that year. And I had my stick. And And it's an incredible piece of work.
Beautiful. Oh,
And the amazing thing is, so the other day, I was in Cleveland doing a presentation on this God and Love on Route 80 book, which is all about synchronicity. And somebody came in there and she said, I actually know the guy who makes these sticks. And there is someone who's even been in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. He's kind of an arts and craftsy, old African-American. He's about 90 years old now. So I'm going to try to meet him the next time I'm back in Ohio. But that event, you could say, well, statistically, at some point in the history of the universe, this perfectly right person is going to come out of the shadows of the night, having had a dream, and he's going to find a person who's kind of down and out because he's feeling the pain of leaving home. And it's all going to happen just that way. But it's such a stretch rationally. It's such a stretch to try to explain this in terms of probability theory, because it's so improbable that it's actually more rational to say there really is this universal mind, this loving, infinite mind, a mind of love and light. And it's got our backs, but we have to notice it, and we have to want to notice it.
exactly. It's it's so easy to say something. Well, that was just a chance happening, and just kind of, or he was just out trying to sell a stick, all that kind of thing. But that's missing the miracle. And you don't get miracles unless you're open to miracles. And
Exactly.
that's part of, when we think of this, there's this sense that life is linear, we're going in a particular direction, and that we're all separate. And when we begin to really embrace the miraculous, we realize how connected we are, and everything is to everything else. And of course, the wisdom keepers, the ancient wisdom keepers, have been saying this for millennia, but now we've got 100+ years of quantum physics saying the same thing, that things are inseparable. There is no separation, and we're not objects in a world of objects. And yet we live as though we're separate. We live our life in this, what Alan Watts called a skin-encapsulated ego, and we go around bouncing into other skin, and so we miss the flow of the magic. And
Yes.
I think that to really be of service, we first have to be connected to ourselves, to our bodies, to our emotions, but then recognize that there is no separation. Talk about your sense of that. You've been in so many situations of being of service, creating loving communities, particularly in the medical world, but really everywhere you've been your whole life.
Well, I truly believe that service, but even the whole idea of an ethical life, Michael, it has to begin with this sense of oneness, that we really are connected. And I don't just mean externally connected in the obvious sense that, a very fine Buddhist meditation will tell you to look at this stick and think about the person who cut the tree, who carved it, who had to put the wood on a truck and bring it down the highway to Cleveland. And of course, someone had to make the highway. And in other words, in the end, even having a pen in your hand points to the reality of human connectedness. But at a deeper level, we are spiritually all part of one mind. It doesn't mean that we don't have individual identity, but absolutely. And I've always been skeptical of rational self-interest theories about the good life, because as soon as something isn't in your rational self-interest, you violate it, and you easily do harm and inflict wanton pain on others. And so that inner sense of oneness is, for me, the core of ethics. And it's not just rationality, it's not just a logical thing, but it really is a spiritual thing. So the great influences in my life, because you're up in Vancouver, Jean Vanier was my mentor for many years, and I started 2 L'Arche centers in Cleveland, and now we have L'Arche, Long Island. And he's passed away now, but he was the humblest, most profound spiritual man I ever knew. I considered him a true mentor. Being with him was so special because he had no ego. He just was so unselfed, but he was also still there. He loved himself, but it was a deeper self. It was a bigger self because he wasn't just caught up in relating to people to the extent that they contributed to his little agendas, but he was serving people with these cognitive developmental disabilities. One of the great experiences of my life was going up to his farm about an hour north of Paris, and we had a great conference there, and he just spoke his heart about the oneness, and it was a spiritual thing. It wasn't to be taken lightly. It was a very, very deep sense of our connectedness in this sort of overarching consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't a bumper sticker.
No, no.
Right. So, besides the myth of separation, which is challenging for people to actually get, it's a practice of recognizing our interconnection, like you just did with your staff there. There's also 2 other areas that I can think of right this moment that I'd like to talk about. One is the sense of brokenness that we live inside of, that something's wrong with me, something's wrong with you, something's wrong with the world, something's broken and needs to be fixed. And along with that, maybe in concert with that, is I don't belong. Those 2 seem to go together. So talk about belonging and brokenness.
I think the will to belong is one of the most fundamental, healthy dynamics of any human life. If you look at the opioid epidemic that we have across the world, and certainly across the US and in Canada and certain areas, it all comes because people are alienated. They don't have communities. They're bowling alone, as Putnam would put it. They can't find meaning in community. They can't find teachings. They can't find symbols. They can't find valuable expectations. They can't find a purpose in life. So the strongest predictor that somebody will become, in fact, an abuser of drugs or of alcohol is lack of purpose and lack of community. We just published a big article on this. And the sociologists are talking a lot now about something called edge work. You can see documentaries, people, crawling under a rock, just using or a cliff, just using their fingers to hold on with no ropes to help them if they fall. That sort of edge work is where people are actually trying to find meaning now, because they're not finding meaning in relationships. They're not finding meanings in families, in spiritual communities. They're not finding role models. They're not finding opportunities to serve and to be who they really can be. So this is a real tragedy. And I think that until we reconnect and form communities, and I mean spiritual communities too, we can just expect this very, very challenging carnage to go on. The other day I was with a few medical students in the intensive care unit, and there were 3 teenagers, all of whom had had opioid overdoses. One was brain dead and they were procuring organs. One was in a kind of minimally conscious state, and the other one had had Narcan and it had worked with him. But the thing is that however you treat this problem, this epidemic, the bottom line is it's happening because people don't find meaning and community in their lives, and so they're running on empty.
Yeah, that's true. And so many people do the opposite thing. When they feel they don't belong, instead of getting connected or going out and helping out at a homeless shelter or a drug place or somewhere where they're actually losing themselves, they could actually go out and be part of that community and spread love and be connected by being of service, which gives them a sense of belonging. I have a friend that's out on the streets in Vancouver on East Hastings Street, and his name is Happy. Actually, his name is Happy, which is so appropriate. And he's out on the streets with every day, working and being with these people, and he's the happiest guy I know, even though with his name Happy. And so but many people say, well, I don't have time, I'm too busy, I have to pay the rent, you don't understand my situation. What do you say to those people that are just so caught up in the speed of life?
The speed of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, the speed of life, and they can't slow down to notice and to connect. So I'm in Greater New York, and when our students go down to, say, Atlanta or New Orleans for summer break to do some volunteer activity, they come back, I debrief them, Michael, and I ask them, so what did you notice? And they said, actually, people talk to each other. They haven't seen too much of that on the Long Island Expressway. I have to tell you a really funny story. Some friends of mine and I wrote an article in a psychology journal about widows and widowers who had been married for a long time, and this is important, happily, right? And now they're going through a process of grief and bereavement. They feel very broken. They don't belong now, at least in that dyadic sense. And so the studies showed that if they could self-report just informal helping in their neighborhoods, in their communities, let alone volunteering formally, even for just a couple of hours a week, they got through grief and bereavement more quickly and in a more enduring fashion. So somebody in New York City caught hold of this article, and they called me and they said, well, we have a society of widows and widowers, and we want you to come into Manhattan and give a talk at the Marriott Hotel. I guess it's on 50th Street. So I gave a talk on this paper in this big room full of hundreds of people, and then there was time for Q&A at the end. And I noticed there was some guy in the back of the room, and he was frantically waving his hands. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I don't care what you say, buddy. I don't do nothing for nothing. And even though, we had written a beautiful paper saying that he was going to be happier, feel more physically robust, be able to deal with loss and disappointment, have deeper, more meaningful friendships, sleep better, et cetera, be happier. He just couldn't get through the ideology that if he wasn't getting some direct payback, some calculated reciprocal benefit, that he wasn't getting anything out of this. But the point you're making is that just as a byproduct, a side effect of sincerely helping others, we are more resilient. And I once wrote a book about this called Why Good Things Happen to Good People, that did nicely. And I've been studying this for, about 30 years. And, I was able to start an institute to really focus in on it. But now, people understand that as a byproduct, my way of putting it is that in the giving of self lies the unsought discovery of a deeper self. And that's a very shamanistic comment. It reminds you of Buber, but it's also deeper than that, because when we help others, we're helping them, but we're also helping ourselves, because we are one.
Yeah, St. Francis, in dying to self, we're born to eternal life. We awaken to eternal life. One of the things about this crazy speed that we're going at is a lot of it is a product of consumption too. Our need for more and more and more. More is better. We need more, and we find ourselves chasing after things. And that has a huge impact. If our focus is always on what can I get, what can I get, what can I get, and we're chasing it, it's very different than slowing down and saying, wait a minute, can't I just receive? What if I just actually became a receptor and I allowed things to come to me? What would I notice, when I wasn't chasing things? And I think that's an important sense of service, is if you're going to be serving, it's because you're committed to getting value and receiving from the people you're serving. that is the reward that you get by recognizing and belonging to a community where you receive by giving. Your thoughts around that?
Well, very much so. It's interesting that you mentioned this because just 2 weeks ago, we had a wonderful, we call it a Schwartz rounds in our hospital here with the children's hospital and all the clinicians and nurses and clinical social workers. And we had 4 mothers whose children had been in the neonatal intensive care unit. And we asked them if they could speak for just 3 minutes each about the one interaction they had with the caregivers around them that really shaped their experience, that was so beautiful, so compassionate, and get granular about it. Talk really about the details. That it wasn't that it took so much time, but it was the sort of depth of it that connected with them. And boy, they spoke so glowingly, and 2 of them were in tears about it. And the whole group out there, and that was about 80 clinicians, and there are big problems with clinicians losing meaning in life and getting burned out, and there are even per capita high suicide rates among medical professionals. But for them to see that and to hear that and to recognize in that display of gratitude, I mean, there was hugging going on. The mothers were hugging the clinicians, and it was so beautiful. And in the end, if you ask me, what is it that can allow these clinicians who are under so much stress and they have so much responsibility and they see so much difficulty in life, what can really save them? Well, you know what it is? It's the patient expressing gratitude and appreciation and giving back in that small way.
Yeah, and I think it's way bigger than that. Like, what would life be like if our sole purpose from morning till night was to express our gratitude to the world? Every morning I have a shower outside, and even if it's raining, I usually go out and take a shower. It's got hot water, but it's rainy and cold here in the winter, but I'm still out there because it's my opportunity to be grateful for the water, for the ocean, for the air I'm breathing. And I spend time in the shower starting out my day with, all the things I'm grateful for. And I think also if we can do that at the end of the day and say, well, maybe I had some challenge. Can I be grateful for what I'm learning from that challenge? Or can I express my gratitude for the little things? I had food on the table. I've got running water. I've got heat and it's winter. The things that we don't think about, flipping on a light and electricity, a switch and light comes in. There's so much. And to me, that's a lot to do with this, you said it, that it's this gratitude that opens us to belonging and receiving through giving, and this sense of interconnection with all of life. Your thoughts about that, Stephen?
Well, absolutely. John Templeton, Sir John, who was always my mentor as well, one of these people I ran into in a tremendous episode of synchronicity in a hotel near Washington, D.C., and he would eventually fund an institute to study unlimited love. He thought the 3 greatest virtues that we need to have in life to connect and to be successful were, first of all, humility. And he meant by humility, I don't have to fill up the room. I need to leave space in the room for others, not humiliation, right? So humility consistent with a true love of self, right? But not being inflated, right? And then he thought gratitude. He thought gratitude was right up there with humility as one of the core virtues. And the other one was kindness. And he thought that the 3 of those things were intimately connected. So I get up in the morning and I do a meditation. You get up about 5 in the morning, and one of my meditations is that the more grateful we are, the happier we'll be. And I do feel that happiness is very much a perspective and an appreciation. So I totally agree. And yet, I also would quickly add that there are an awful lot of people and it's a sad thing. We haven't passed the torch. So I know adolescent kids around these areas, they don't even know how to say thank you. I mean, the very basics of etiquette are missing. So it's just not part of their MO and their consciousness, and it's very sad for them.
Yeah. Yeah, that really brings up a whole nother area. I just started a new show. Actually, it airs Tuesday. Just a little plug for it. Called The Movement, and it's a spotlight on youth activism. And I was really excited. I did the interview yesterday with two amazing young women who are saving our oceans. They've built these organizations and they're doing amazing work. But I think in the last 4 decades or so, we have bred a sense of entitlement in our children and young people. And that entitlement is, I don't even know what to say about it, but I hear it all the time. And then I have these two women that are just giving, and their whole life is about climate change and plastic and saving the oceans, and then there's so many people that are kind of stuck in that place of entitlement. How do you work with a lot of young people? How do you get through that sense of entitlement?
I'm truly blessed because I've always worked in medical schools, for 35 years, starting programs on compassionate care and attentive listening and helping them to realize how their humility and their kindness and their gratitude for being involved in the art of healing, how that all plays into their professional identity formation, if you will. So we're big on that here at Stony Brook, but wherever I've gone, it's been a priority. As far as the young people now coming into medical school, so, I've had a few decades to look at this. I tell you that this generation of new medical students is unbelievably generous and kind, better than 20 or 30 years ago. I think some more students were coming into medicine to be entitled, to be economically successful. But, things have changed in healthcare, and the economic benefits, well, if you really want to make a lot of money, don't go into medicine.
Be a broker.
So, yeah, they're here for the right reasons. And the young people, a lot of people say, well, this is a narcissistic generation, and some sociologists have made that claim. But I really believe if you look back even to the 1920s, to a study at the University of California, Berkeley, about half of 12-year-olds, i.e. preteens, if you ask them what floats their boat, they'll say, well, I want to help others. I want to use my talents to contribute and serve humanity. And then another half says other things. And and it's actually still roughly the same, except I agree that the creativity and the dynamic and the entrepreneurial dimensions of these young people and the organizations they're funding and starting is through the roof. But also on the contrary, a lot of the really negative things are almost unimaginable. But I'm very confident that things are going to go well because people are, they're more in touch with that inner being than we sometimes acknowledge. We just have to be explicit about it, and we have to encourage them. But yeah, I'm impressed.
Oh, that's good to hear. Well, it's getting close to time to open it for Q&A, and I'm wondering if you would like to do some kind of little meditation or journey or visualization. Is there something that you feel called to do?
Well, there was something that it's more of a little bit of a reflective reading, if that's okay.
That's perfect. Sure.
So, there was I'm going to have a sip of something here. Hold on. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't do that. Okay. There was a great English poet named W.H. Auden.
Oh, I love Auden. Yeah.
Yeah. And, he wasn't sure what he thought about human nature. I mean, you read the newspapers and people do pretty dastardly things, and they love their kids very unwisely and give them a sense of self-indulgence and that they're the only people on earth who matter, and then they completely disregard people who aren't quite like them. It's a lot of unwise love, a lot of myopic love, a lot of inconsistent love, a lot of destructive love. So he wasn't completely idealistic about mere human love, but he really believed in, if you will, the love that made humans. I mean, he had a sense, a mystical sense. He was a bit of a shaman, you know, a mystical sense that that we could be the instruments of a higher love, of a pure love, and if we can get into that flow, that we could achieve happiness.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a little passage. You can close your eyes, and I'll read it slowly and reflectively. And it's from Auden. One fine night in June 1933, I was sitting on a lawn after dinner with 3 colleagues, 2 women, and 1 man. We liked each other well enough, but were certainly not intimate friends, nor had any of us a sexual interest in another. Incidentally, we had not drunk any alcohol. We were talking casually about everyday matters when quite suddenly and unexpectedly something happened. Now here you go. I felt myself invaded by a power which, though I consented to it, was irresistible and certainly not mine. I felt myself invaded, imagine that, by a power which, though I consented to it, was irresistible and certainly not mine. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly, because thanks to the power I was doing it, what it meant to love one's neighbor as oneself. I was also certain, though the conversation continued to be perfectly ordinary, that my 3 colleagues were having the same experience. In the case of one of them, I was able later to confirm this. My personal feelings toward them were unchanged. They were still colleagues, not intimate friends, but I felt their existence as themselves to be of infinite value and rejoiced in it. Let me reread that and just try to get yourself in this spiritual space. I felt their existence. Imagine someone who's hard to love, someone who really tests your patience. Just look at them in great detail. Look at their facial expression. Look at the light around them. And feel that their existence is of infinite value. And then just smile in your heart and with your face too. Smile and rejoice in it. Well, I read this because, you know, Auden was not an irrational guy.
Yeah.
He wasn't out of his mind. He was an incredibly brilliant writer.
Yeah.
But here he is talking, he uses that metaphor of invasion. Here he is saying he's invaded by a power of love. It's beyond him, it's within him, it's also within us all, and we can connect with it, but it feels as though it's just come out of nowhere, and suddenly he can give infinite value to people around him, even if he's not particularly close to them. And that's not human love, you know. So John Templeton would have agreed with that. He wasn't so interested in human love as this deeper kind of love, and that's where spirituality and community really comes in.
Yeah, and belonging.
And belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Marielle, would you like to open up the lines for questions or comments or about what Stephen just read, or just anything that people would like to share or have a question about, and tell them how to do that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So If you're with us by phone, to unmute yourself, it's *6. If you're with us on the computer, if you go to the Manage Participants tab and you press that, there's a little hand icon, so you can raise your hand, and then you can unmute yourself once we call on you. And there's also the chat box, so if you want to just write something in and have me read it out, that's also a possibility. So we'd love to hear some people's voices. That would be preferable.
Yeah. We have a smaller than usual group. I think the technology kept some people from getting on, unfortunately. But that means you have your own airtime. So please raise your hand, or Marielle, while we're waiting for some hands to go up, I don't see any yet. I can read out a few of the comments. I don't like to read them when I'm actually communicating. So something that
Sylvia wrote, and this was in regards to the conversation about the magic in the universe. It's from Sylvia. There's most certainly a universal love looking over us. I was traveling and I'd misplaced my Park Service senior pass. I searched for it for a couple of days, asking Spirit for help, but no success. The time had come to move on to my next destination. I was trying to figure out how best to get another pass while I was picking up the place. I cleared off counters and the coffee table, and I grabbed my bags to go. I turned around for a quick last check, and there on the coffee table that I had just cleared was my senior pass. Once I let the worry go and I went with the flow, the miracle became available to me.
Yeah, that's such a good point, isn't it, Stephen?
Yeah, it's a really beautiful point. And you know, I was actually doing a radio program the other day, and I was talking about these kinds of episodes of synchronicity when you're in the flow, and you know, you're when you're kind to others, when you're living in that energy, it invites more synchronicity to come into your experience. That is my personal belief and my own personal experience. So there was actually a radio interviewer, and she said, well, you know, I don't have any experience in my life of synchronicity. I'm burned out. I work in a hospital setting, and I just don't think this stuff is real for me. Maybe it was once upon a time, but not anymore. And I kind of struggled with it, and I ultimately said, but you know, it is real. And we just have to work at kind of getting you back into a place of inner peace. Because once you do that, you can rediscover that energy and things will begin to happen.
Yeah. You know, language is such an important thing. We don't recognize often the power that our word creates the world. It doesn't describe the world. Like Sylvia's pass was probably there all the time, but the word that she was looking like it's out here was that it's not here, that I have to find it. It's not here. You know, you could be thinking you're barefoot, not seeing your shoes, you know, that kind of, but it's really, we're creating a world with every thought, with every word all the time. And so it's really important to listen to yourself, both on the external and the internal speaker, because if you want to know how your life got like this, look at what you've been saying about your life. Mm-hmm. You know, so I think that's a really important aspect, is that we become more attentive, not only listening. You talked about listening, and we think of listening as I'm listening to out here, but in fact, you're actually listening to in here, your interpretation of out there all the time. So you might as well go directly to the source, you know, yes. And yes. Listen to what's going on when you're fully present with somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good tip. Good point, Sylvia. Thanks for sharing that.
Deborah would like to share something. Go ahead, Deborah.
Hey, Deborah.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
This is absolutely wonderful. I love being here.
Oh, we're so glad you're here.
This is something I do not talk about very often at all, and certainly not in a uh, online like this. So
Thank you for your courage. That's a courageous act. Thank you, Deborah. I know we know what it takes to do that. So thank you.
I feel, thank you. I feel that this is a very safe community, and I also sense that it's something that I am to speak about more widely. But just the short version now. Um, when I was 11, I was very, very sick, and I was rushed to the hospital, and I had a clinical death. Um, and of course it was just, very short time frame, and then I was injected with adrenaline to get my heart started again. But I experienced the most exquisite, what they call a near-death experience, that I will never ever forget. It's as clear as if it happened yesterday. And within that, I felt this absolutely exquisite, profound, benevolent love, and I was enveloped in it. And the poem that you read reminded me of yes, feeling invaded with it, willingly so, because I feel that that is our true nature. And what I experienced within this experience was what we all are. We are all that divine love. I had what they call a life review, where I experienced, it was like every single person I had ever passed on the street, ever, anywhere in my life, our thoughts have deeply profound effects on that other person, which in essence is us, on a whole other, telepathic level in a sense. So I experienced our oneness, and it's so hard to put into words, this experience. And I did not want to return to the body, yet I knew on some level I needed to, because there was more that I was to live in this earthly experience. And so I didn't go into all the specific details of what I experienced, but I do believe that we are all interconnected in such deep and profound ways. I've had experiences of that, throughout my life, that, one might negate and just toss it off as a coincidence, but I do know that they are real, and it's almost like it was a gift that I was given, this experience. And I'm leaving out a lot because of time's sake and such, but we are so profoundly connected to one another.
So beautiful, Deborah. Thank you for sharing that with us and trusting us to hold that. I can feel the joy and sadness that is in that. I can just feel it in my body, and it's such a powerful event. It's interesting that I had the physicist Irvin Laszlo on, who's in his 90s now, recently, and I told him I had a very similar experience to what you're talking about, so I can really relate to it, and died on the operating table and remember every bit of it. And being on a convex mirror and having someone reaching and trying to decide whether to go or stay, and yet, you know, just everything connected that same. And he told me how jealous he was because he'd been 90 some years, you know, and he'd never had that experience, but he studies that, and he's talked to many people about that experience. And yeah, it so validates our interconnection. It goes from bumper sticker to, yeah, this is really it. And then we forget it, and then we remember it, and then we forget it, and then we remember it. Um, so thank you for the reminder of it. Stephen, you probably had a lot of people being in the medical
Oh, yeah, yeah.
that have had that. What's your take on this?
Well, Deborah and Michael and everybody. So this experience of life review in these kinds of near-death moments is universal. You know, whether you're in India or Japan or in New York, it's very universal. And people do, in fact, somehow have a sense of the whole of their lives. And it's very, very deep. It's great that you had this when you were so young, and it really formed your whole life going through the years. So it was a kind of a protective halo, in a sense, you know, because you had an insight and a perspective that was a gift, clearly a gift. And the whole notion of light and love shows up in these descriptions very frequently. So I guess just to mention this, in 4 weeks exactly to the day yesterday, we're beginning a big new research project on what we're calling transformation experiences of dying. And we're doing it at NYU, and there's a very distinguished head of cardiac resuscitation named Sam Parnia. He's written some very good books on this, but because now people, they're brought back after their hearts have stopped, sometimes after, you know, 5, 6, 7 minutes. I mean, it's amazing what resuscitation does. And so we're looking at their descriptions of their experiences. And we're also bringing a lot of positive psychologists. So we want to look at how it changed the dynamics of people's lives. Did they become more grateful, Michael? Did they become kinder? Did they find that they had a deeper sense of purpose, and so forth, et cetera? So I think this is a field where a tremendous amount of work still needs to be done. Some of what we know is a little outdated and a little bit, I don't know, a little bit less than fully objective. But I'm a big believer in the revival of a very scientifically robust and objective assessment of just these kinds of experiences, because I do believe, Deborah, that they're profound, and they bring us into a space internally that is always there, and we need to be more aware of it. Does that sound okay?
Oh, yes. Thank you for sharing that. That sounds amazing. And yeah, and through life, having had little snippets of that, again, just very briefly, it was 15 years ago. I was going through a really, really difficult period in my life. The details are irrelevant right now, but I sat in my kitchen and I surrendered. I prayed and prayed because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what decision to make. And I was enveloped or invaded. I love that word now. By this benevolent light. That's all I saw. That's all I felt. It was so, again, so pervasive, and it took me over, and I was that. And then again, I don't think it was long, probably maybe a minute at the most. I have no idea because it seemed to be outside of time. But my kitchen sort of, everything I saw, everything again. But there was this, and I knew what to do. I knew what decision to make. I knew the decision I needed to make. And what I noticed though after was I had a spontaneous healing. I had lifelong asthma and migraines that immediately stopped, completely gone after that moment.
Wow.
Well, because you're attaching to
Yeah.
a universal love, and when that happens, things happen with your body, with they happen with neuroplasticity, with epigenetics. There's a real impact on health, and that relationship between spirit and mind and body is something that we're only beginning to fully understand, but actually it's very, very profound. So I'm not surprised.
Deborah, I also want to thank you for bringing up something that we haven't talked about, but it's so important in this interconnection, and that's surrender. Surrendering to what is. It's the ultimate, sometimes you have to get to the dark night of the soul place, but this sense of surrender that you're talking about, of complete allowing things to be both the way they are and the way they aren't, without pulling in the I like to talk about the remembered past and the imagined future, but the thing that takes you to your knees when all you can be is be present with the depth of the pain or the experience that you're having, and surrendering to that. That doesn't mean succumbing, that means allowing. And I think there's a big difference. People resist the idea of surrender. And Stephen, your thoughts about that? I think it's an important issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. I do a lot of work on the 12-step programs, and the first step is surrender, or they call it humility, recognizing that, I don't have the answer. Like, you didn't have the answer, you couldn't come up with a decision, but just giving up yourself to a higher power, and everything moves on from there. Unfortunately, so many people just don't get that, and they feel that surrender is humiliating in some way, shape, or form, but it's really not. It's the beginning of a transformation.
Yeah, people look at it as weakness. And I often think of the difference between, in a windstorm, a willow and an oak. When you can move with the wind and take that wind and allow it as it comes, in a very big storm, whereas an oak, if the storm is big enough, it goes over because it's rigid. And I think of that metaphor sometimes when the winds are really strong in my life. And I have great respect for the wind as, well, I won't get into the shamanic aspect of that, but I really honor the winds of change when they come, or I try to. And when I resist it, I end up on my rear end, on the floor, and have to surrender anyway. Oh, Deborah, thank you so much. It's really nice to have you on the call. Much gratitude to you for sharing your wisdom and your experience. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I feel I'm super grateful to be here and to have connected with you in this way. This is it's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah.
And is there anyone else that?
Yeah, Jeff. Hi, let me find you here. You can unmute yourself actually on your left side.
Jeff, I see you. Okay.
I can't see myself, but anyway, I was 10 years old when I had my NDE experience, and so I've had 60 years of being able to live with the process of allowing the resonance
Mhm.
of the frequency of life really to embrace what it is that I have been shown.
Mhm.
And for 50 of those 70 years, I have been an astrologer.
Uh-huh.
And since this is a new moon consideration that we're talking about, and the new moon is in basically within the hour in Libra. And the Libra archetype is about how do we get along with the other?
Mm.
And the epitome of how to effectively grasp what it means to engage with any other
Mhm.
really requires such a profound level of awareness of who I am.
Right.
And in that engagement experience, there's an invitation to flow with, it's an energy that will only take place within the context of that space between us, as we allow it to actually envelop both of us simultaneously in a conversation about so much more than just being an individual.
Right.
And when I look at the chart for right now, we have the new moon happening almost exactly across from Chiron, which everybody says, this is the wounded healer. And I asked them, do you know what Chiron's first wound was? And they say, oh, he was hit by an arrow that was tipped with hydra blood and, in his thigh or calf or wherever it was. And I say, no, it wasn't that. His first wound was he was abandoned by his parents.
Uh-huh.
And when I think right now about the process of how we interact
Yeah.
with one another,
Yeah.
and that first awareness that in the world right now, as it exists, so many people not having the physical abandonment by their parents, but this does happen on occasion, but the non-awareness of the fact that we have not been shown our connection to source.
Right.
So, in that sense, it's kind of like an abandonment that of a presence that can, really, it comes through the heart.
It does. Can I respond to that, Michael? Very
Yes,
briefly.
please.
So,
Beautiful. Yeah.
so Jeff, that's so beautiful. And the fact that you were 10 years old, did you say? Yeah. I give the medical students, there's a book by a Russian novelist named Tolstoy called The Death of Ivan Ilyich. And it's about a guy who is so self-obsessed and so edgy and nasty. His whole life has been running on empty. And he doesn't see it until he has a near-death experience. He's very sick. He has a near-death experience, and he sees a light. Again, to Deborah's comment, he sees a light, and he feels love. And then he comes out of it, and he sees his son's hand on his hand. And for the first time in his entire life, he feels love for his son, right? And then it spreads, and it comes from the heart. And then he feels love for his wife. And then at that point, the way the story ends is that it's okay. Now he can die. So he kind of stretches out, and it's okay to let go. But I always, my medical students say, gosh, it's okay. But wouldn't it have been better if Ivan Ilyich had that experience when he was, say, in midlife, or even when he was a teenager, or say when he was 10 or 11 or 12, because he would have had so much more to live for. And I do think that what you're saying is very profound, and thank you for it. And the connectedness that we lack, and the emptiness, it's such a crisis, and there are no solutions until we get that straight.
Yeah.
Michael,
Thanks, Jeff. I love the bridge behind you. That's a beautiful painting you've got up there. It reminds me of what we're doing here is creating bridges of connection. It's really lovely. Thanks, Jeff. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Always.
Anyone else,
Yeah,
either written or
Kat
hands?
wrote a question. Is it possible that what is being seen as narcissism in young people is heightened sensitivity and awareness? That grounding, shielding, and community sharing can be taught to bridge the interior-exterior divide.
Yeah. Stephen, you want to say something about that?
No, why don't you take that?
Possible. Okay. Well, yes. And I think it's a matter of perception. It's kind of the glass half empty or half full. And it's a matter of where we choose to stand in the matter. We actually have a choice of how we're going to see that. You know, we live in a field of all potentiality. So the way that it becomes what is we choose that potential. So I totally think that that's possible. I don't know what else to say about it other than, you know, recognizing that we always have a choice. You know, we think that our stories from the past are shaping how we're going to be in the present, regardless of where you are. But there's, as Viktor Frankl said, at that moment, and Viktor Frankl was in Auschwitz and a doctor and saw the worst of the worst. He says, we always, no matter what, at that point of stimulus, have a choice to how we will respond. And this is a man who was in, you know, the gas chambers and around people dying all the time. But still, it's not the circumstances that are dictating who we're being. It's how we choose our reaction to the circumstance. We may not have anything to say about the circumstances, but we do have something to say about the choices we make in the circumstances.
Yeah, very much so. Life is all about responding to circumstances with higher spiritual emotions, like kindness and gratitude and love and forgiveness is so important. If we have those assets, which really do invoke a kind of inner light, if you will, if they're going to be robust and enduring, we need that. And the whole idea of life as a spiritual journey, you never know who you're going to encounter, and sometimes it's not easy or necessarily good, but I view life as an expanding canvas. And so no matter what difficulties there are in the moment, our job, I like Jackson Pollock, the painting, because he would throw a gob of ugly paint down on the middle of a canvas on the floor of his barn. And frankly, it looked like nothing you wanted to bring home. But then he would expand the canvas with these beautiful lines of vibrant energy, which I think were really mystically informed. And by the end of the day, this, what began as a gob of goo that looked ugly and nasty, it was a complete work of phenomenal beauty. And so it's my responsibility. You know, I'm going to tell the story. When I got recruited to Stony Brook, I had mixed feelings, as you know, about leaving Cleveland. So the president of this university called me and she said, look, Governor Spitzer is going to be very helpful to you. Governor Elliott Spitzer of New York is going to help you with your program, give you money. The first night we were here, I went into a pizza place in the foyer and there was a magazine rack and the newspaper was the New York Post. And on it was Governor Spitzer in his underwear and socks. And it said, Governor no more, because he had apparently been utilizing just FYI taxpayer money in some of the brothels around New York. And so I thought, you know, this is a difficult moment. And the difficult moment. And the other thing that happened was, you know, I had this Institute for Research on Unlimited Love and had been on a lot of papers, and we'd funded a lot of research about this very invasive experience that Deborah was talking about. And some cub reporter from a local paper, the Three Village Herald, had gone online and found this stuff. And she'd interviewed the dean of our medical school, who's a famous kidney transplant guy who did Gary Coleman, for example, and said, so what's this unlimited love doing at the medical school? And he said, well, we didn't hire him for that. We wanted to teach communication techniques to our students. So I was like pulverized. And the first day I came to work, I went up the escalator and there was a guy who looked like Mr. Clean. And he had big, brawny arms. And he looked down and he said, are you Dr. Post? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, are you going to save us? And I thought, what a first day of work. But you have to expand the canvas, you know, and you know, over the years, you know, doing that and winning people over one by one. And then, you know, finally creating a culture, which we've done. We just got a recommendation from the American Medical Association as an exemplary culture of care, because we create these circles of trust, I call them, kind of a Parker Palmer image. And we make people feel comfortable, and we and expressing their commitment to the deeper care of their patients than they've ever known. So you have to expand the canvas, and no matter how bleak it looks at the moment, just have confidence and faith. You're in touch with your inner self and your higher spiritual emotions. Things are going to work out.
Yeah. And just one thing to add to that too, you know, there's the am I this or am I that as the person and that you're talking about, you know, which way do we go? But then there's the listening field that you create with that person. And that makes all the difference, because people respond to how they're listened to, and that shapes their future. So, you know, earlier Stephen mentioned teachers and people, mentors that made a big difference. You know, when we notice ourselves going to the negative side of the equation, I love that you can bring it back and listen for what's alive and what wants to happen and what's beautiful and what strengths and talents and gifts does this person have. And I remember an English teacher in like 7th grade or something, and I was a real smart ass, you know, I was the kid that parents would tell, don't play with that kid, he's trouble, you know, in school. And I had a lot of early trauma and things like that. And I forgot where I was going now with this. I had an English teacher that, you know, had us write something about, you know, just he wanted to see how we wrote. So I wrote this paper. He said, write it on anything you want. So I wrote this paper. I can't exactly remember, but it was like why English teachers should be deported because of the trouble they're causing in our country. And it was just, you know, this crazy thing, and it was scribbled, and I had misspelled words and all this, and, you know, it's just being a smart ass. And I handed the paper in, threw it in, it was all crumpled up, you know, and I get back this paper and he says, very creative, and that's all he wrote on it, you know. And I went, And over the year, not only did this guy get me, you know, I'm a journalist now, right? Not only did he completely shift by the way he listened to me, who I was being, but he even had me reading and writing poetry, which at the time I would have never, you know, opened a book of poetry in the world that I lived in. So that listening field that we create for each other is the most important thing perhaps in this area of belonging and being of service. Your listening is being of service. Hey?
Yeah. You know, so I got very lucky in life to, well, synchronicitous in life to encounter some really wonderful people. And one of them was Dame Cicely Saunders, who invented the first hospice, St. Christopher's in London. And she actually invented the term, and you know, so in 1999, I was doing a conference at MIT on empathy, altruism, and spirituality. We had about 30 people there, scientists, exemplars like Jean Vanier, and kind of philosophical, theological thinkers. And Dame Cicely flew over from London, and she gave the dinner speech. She was 79 at the time. She said, you know, I'm getting older, but I still go into St. Christopher's Hospice every morning, and I change bedpans for an hour, because she really wanted to recognize gratefully, Michael, and with humility, the significance of being able to serve people who were dying. And then she said, I sit on the end of the bed and I just listen. She said, listening is an action of love. She said, I ask them to focus their minds on the thing in their life that has been most gratifying and most meaningful, because she said she doesn't like people who are dying to be second guessing. Oh, married the wrong person, made the wrong choice in 1982, But she really focuses them on the most meaningful and creative and positive elements of their lives. And she said she would sit sometimes for 2 or 3 hours and not interrupt them and just let them talk about these things. And she called it dignity therapy. She said that by listening, which was an act of love, she was enhancing their dignity. And then she said she'd ultimately have to go and do some PR, some media type stuff. And she died 4 years later. And the obituaries were as long as your arm across papers all around the world.
Sure.
And she was a visionary and a listener, and listening is definitely a form of love. Absolutely.
And her vision is living on, just in your sharing about her too.
Yeah, yeah.
And not to mention all the hospices all over the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we never know what difference our listening and our compassion will make in the lives of one person or many people, and it really doesn't matter. What matters is that we do make a difference.
Right.
And, everything we do makes a difference, and it's either gonna heal or wound people. So anyway, Stephen, we're at the end of our time. Marielle was just about to tell me, right?
Yes, but also I would like to read out something in the chat that just, so
Thank
that
you.
it's heard. People might have read it already, but Julie wrote, in terms of finding one's place of service, I'm at the opening of my 6th decade. Having not lived a conventional life up to this point, of course, I don't have the security that a conventional life may have provided. In the past, I could easily find my place of service in my community. Now, having gone through the cancer journey a number of times and having it change my body and my physical ability to speak, thus my preference at the chat, I'm having a challenge reconciling my life's purpose to my current physical abilities. Apparently, I'm supposed to be present for my daughter and my granddaughter as we all live together, and yet my inner voice wants to have some more success in connecting with things that sparked me previously. I guess I'm seeking a little feedback on acceptance and intent in creating the life I want, all the while appreciating what is present here in the moment and recognizing where I'm supposed to be.
Was that Julie? Is that
Julie? Yeah.
Julie, thank you so much. Such a beautiful way to bring us to a close. First of all, I'm sorry that you've gone through so much with your cancer. And I love that you lived an unconventional life. I would say it is a life where we recognize that there is no real security. There's never any security. So it's the whole idea of my retirement and all these things, that could stop any moment, any day, any time. The real security is your heart. And the more we can keep our heart open, I don't know why, but I'm reminded to tell you what's coming through me right now is to read Mark Nepo. Mark is a dear friend. He'll be on in a few weeks, actually. And his battle with cancer was epic, and it really created the most amazing understanding of the world by his going through that and dealing with it. And you're still there, and yes, on loving family, but loving the things that we say we can't love. I've been with people, and I'm sure Stephen has too, that have said things like cancer was the greatest gift I ever had, because it brings us to the present. And in the present, there's no need for security, because all there is being love, being present, being grateful for what we have, even if it's very, very little. It makes the gratitude so much richer too. If you only have a little and you're grateful for it, it's so big. And like my friend Lynn Twist says, what you appreciate appreciates. So it's in that gratitude and that acceptance that, and honoring that, that heart and that love grows in that, because what you appreciate appreciates. That's what I would say. Stephen?
Oh, I couldn't add to that, Michael. I think, what you said is absolutely profound.
Mm-hmm. And thank you, Julie. Really wonderful. I'm so glad you participated, and we're so glad that each of you is coming to these calls. I will make sure that all the people, which are many people on this list, actually get a copy of this sent out to them, because I get a sense that what happened this morning was people had trouble. In fact, I know that happened to some people getting on the new venue. It's a little bit trickier than the teleconferencing, but thank you for sticking in there. Thank you for being there. And thank you for the gift that you bring when you share yourself. It's just, it's the sharing yourself with each other. And I don't mean necessarily speaking, sharing yourself, but really sharing your real, authentic self. Deborah, I'm just so touched by all of you, and Julie and Jeff for just the sharing that you've done here, because it connects us and it shows us that we all are connected. So,
Yes.
And Stephen, thank you for your decades and decades of being of service and, bringing love into places where they go, where Mr. Clean says.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. I had one quote that I wanted to end with.
Yeah.
That came to my mind, and I really liked it. I was thinking about this program. So it's from Eleanor Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote is, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams."
Yes.
Very powerful, and so stick with the beauty of your dreams. It's like what the envelope said to the stamp: stick with me and we'll go places. Stick with the beauty of your dreams, and stick with that light, and you'll go places, and it will take you places. And you're not making your own life except in your responsivity, but you're following that journey, and that's the beauty.
Yeah.
And don't get off Route 80.
And I wanted to also say that next month, or it's actually, the end of October, I'll have my friend Roger Walsh on again with me. He's the head of psychiatry at University of California. He's written many, many books on spirituality and shamanism. And like Stephen and I, we always have a great time. Roger is very astute and brilliant guy, and I love bantering with him like I have with you on this show. And the theme next week is happiness. And it's a theme he's written some books on, and I'm excited to be with Roger again. I also wanted to say that we love it when you support us. We send out a lot of free things, but you can become a patron. I love the idea of being a patron of anything. So you can become a patron for $2, $5, $10, $1,000 a month, whatever you'd like to do, but it really allows us to provide these programs. We have the Monday series going on now, which is available for free also, and that's about making money while making a difference, which is really about breaking down the myth of money and opening up to the innate gifts that we have that have nothing to do with money, but it's to support social change makers. So,
and also creating community.
And creating, we've got a global community, and we're all looking at what we have to offer and what we need, and we're interchange. We have a big thing. So join us. We alternate on Mondays. Is this Monday early? This Monday is 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So if you need something, go right to Marielle, support@welloflight.com, and she can get you on the Monday call. The reason we switch is we have a lot of people in Europe one Monday, and then a lot of people down under on the next time. So we switch back and forth.
8 a.m. is the next one.
8 a.m.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then after that would be 5 p.m. So
Yeah.
alternating between those two times.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you again. Thank you, Stephen. Much love to you all. And
you.
we
Deborah, too. Thanks. I see your comments.
Thank
I see,
you.
and Jeff, I see your comments here. Thank you.
Wonderful.
And Stephen, stay in touch and keep me. Let's do something together at some point, because it's really fun to be with you, and I love your wisdom, and thank you for sharing it with all of us.
Well, I look forward to it, and thank you, Michael, and thank you, Marielle. It's been a real delight.
Yes, thank you, Marielle.
Blessings.
Many
And my
blessings
stick is
to all
happy.
of you. Yay!
My stick is happy.
Can't wait to hear when you meet him.
It's
All
jumping.
right.
It's jumping.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.